A reported $400 million, 8 years of development, 14 days on the market. Sony's Concord didn't just fail, it became the most expensive flop in modern gaming history, pulled from storefronts and erased before most players even knew it existed. The easy explanation is that the internet memed it to death. But the real story is bigger than character backlash or online mockery. This was Sony trying to buy its way into a live service economy that free-to-play giants had already locked down. And to understand why that bet collapsed, you have to understand the company that made it. For over 2 decades, Sony built the PlayStation brand on a very specific formula. Their reputation rested on massive single-player blockbusters. Games like Uncharted, The Last of Us, God of War, and Spider-Man defined the platform. These were polished, cinematic experiences with sweeping narratives and high production values. They required years of development, immense capital, and thousands of developers. The business model was straightforward. Sony sold a console, and then they sold premium, high-margin games to that captive audience. Each release was a major event, a self-contained story that players bought, completed, and remembered. The strategy focused on prestige and hardware adoption, rather than service-based retention or digital storefront loops. PlayStation did not rely on keeping players hooked for months at a time. They simply needed to deliver a masterpiece that justified owning the hardware. This approach established Sony as the industry standard for narrative prestige. Players trusted the PlayStation logo as a guarantee of premium quality. However, this reliance on traditional single-player blockbusters also created a corporate vulnerability. In a global market increasingly dominated by recurring revenue and endless virtual ecosystems, a business model built entirely on one-off purchases began to look fragile to Tokyo executives. The math behind prestige blockbusters is notoriously volatile. Developing a cinematic masterpiece requires hundreds of millions of dollars and up to 6 years of intensive labor, while a successful launch generates a massive, one-time spike in revenue. The years of silent development in between create prolonged, unpredictable valleys on the balance sheet. For Tokyo executives looking at 5-year corporate plans, this hit-driven cycle made financial forecasting incredibly difficult. The live service model offered an elegant solution: predictable, recurring cash flow. Instead of convincing a customer to buy a single game once every few years, a successful service title retains players for months or even years, converting daily play into steady, ongoing microtransactions. This constant stream of digital spend dramatically increases the lifetime value of each user. By establishing a portfolio of games that generated continuous profit, Sony aimed to double its first-party revenues and push overall margins toward 13%. From a portfolio perspective, entering this market was not a rejection of PlayStation's narrative identity. It was a logical hedge to stabilize the business. Sony was willing to invest heavily in this transition, viewing the high upfront cost not as a gamble, but as the necessary tuition to learn a highly lucrative new business model. In February 2022, PlayStation President Jim Ryan made this transition a matter of public record. During a corporate briefing, Ryan announced that Sony would lean into 10 live service games. This was not a tentative experiment or a quiet sideline project. It was a declared, company-wide redirection. From an executive standpoint, the financial logic was clean. First-party single-player titles, while prestigious, produced erratic financial spikes. A successful live service game, by contrast, promised a continuous stream of high-margin revenue through battle passes, cosmetic items, and seasonal updates. By leveraging this model, Sony aimed to double its first-party revenues and lift its operating profit margin to roughly 13%. The strategy relied on the basic economics of player retention. In a traditional premium model, the customer relationship effectively ends at the point of sale. In a service model, the point of sale is merely the beginning of a multi-year monetization loop. Each season brings new content, each update refreshes the digital store, and daily play cycles translate directly to predictable, recurring cash flow. Sony did not view this as placing a massive bet on a single, risky title. Instead, leadership structured this as a diversified portfolio play. By spreading capital across 10 distinct projects, the company assumed that even if several failed to find an audience, 1 or 2 massive hits, games capable of generating billions in long-term value, would easily offset the losses and secure the platform's financial future. To turn this portfolio strategy into actual software, Sony needed specialized infrastructure. The company lacked the internal experience to build massive, persistent multiplayer ecosystems from scratch, prompting a rapid search for external expertise. On January 31st, 2022, Sony Interactive Entertainment announced a $3.6 billion acquisition of Bungie, the developers behind Destiny. This was not a traditional purchase aimed at securing platform exclusives. Instead, Sony wanted to import Bungie's live service technology and analytical model, using the studio to evaluate and refine all 10 projects in PlayStation's multiplayer pipeline. The primary vehicle for executing this strategy was Firewalk Studios. Founded in 2018 by industry veterans with extensive multiplayer experience, Firewalk partnered with Sony in April 2021, before being acquired outright in April 2023. The studio's leadership included former Destiny General Manager Tony Hsu and former Bungie Creative Director Ryan Ellis. Firewalk's debut project, Concord, was positioned as the corporate proof of concept. The game was meant to show that Sony could leverage external pedigree to manufacture a premium multiplayer hit. Under this arrangement, Bungie would serve as the strategic filter, while Firewalk acted as the creative engine. By pairing Bungie's operational knowledge with Firewalk's development team, Sony believed they had secured the necessary talent to turn their ambitious live service roadmap into a highly profitable reality. The multiplayer market of the early 2020s was no longer a collection of individual games waiting for competitors. It was a territory already divided among massive entrenched digital ecosystems. Titles like Fortnite, Valorant, Apex Legends, and Overwatch 2 did more than capture players. They occupied their time, social circles, and daily habits. These incumbents spent years rewriting the rules of player engagement. By offering free access, they eliminated the initial financial barrier, allowing millions of players to download and play instantly. Revenue was generated through cosmetic updates, battle passes, and virtual events. This model established powerful network effects. Players chose games because their friends were already there, because their favorite creators streamed those titles daily, and because they had accumulated vast virtual collections and digital identities within those specific worlds. These spaces functioned as virtual hangouts, where gameplay was often secondary to socializing. To challenge these giants, a newcomer had to do more than offer a polished experience. They had to convince players to abandon established social networks, forfeit their virtual progress, and rebuild their gaming habits from scratch. The competitive environment was a battle against entrenched player loyalty, constant content updates, and systemic switching costs. New games had to compete for the finite attention of live streamers and content creators who drove the cultural conversation. In this territory, success required capturing a massive user base immediately to sustain quick matchmaking times and active community discussions. If a game failed to achieve this critical mass instantly, matchmaking queues would widen, players would leave, and the system would collapse. The market was already occupied by platforms that had perfected the art of keeping players locked in. This lock-in is governed by a fundamental principle of platform economics: network effects. In simple terms, a service becomes more valuable as more people use it. For a multiplayer video game, a massive player base does not merely mean shorter matchmaking queues, it creates a self-reinforcing loop. More players attract more players, which in turn attracts content creators, who then broadcast the game to millions of potential users. This self-sustaining cycle turns a successful game into an active social network. To pull a player away from this network, a newcomer must overcome incredibly high switching costs. These barriers are rarely financial. Instead, they are psychological, social, and behavioral. Over years of daily play, users accumulate digital equity. They earn competitive ranks that reflect their skill, build digital wardrobes of rare cosmetic skins, and progress through multi-year storylines. More importantly, they establish routine play habits with their real-world friends. Leaving an established ecosystem requires more than simply trying a new game. It requires walking away from years of earned progress, abandoning a digital identity, and leaving behind the social circle that gathers in that virtual space every night. The game itself becomes secondary to the social infrastructure that binds the user. This reality shifts the competitive bar for any new entrant. Competence is no longer enough. To break this behavioral lock-in, a new game cannot simply match the quality of the incumbent. It must offer a vastly superior value proposition to justify the friction of moving. Without a powerful lever to shatter these existing social networks, a new $40 entry competes against far more than another piece of software. It attempts to tax a community that already lives elsewhere for free. By the time Concord prepared for its first public tests in July 2024, the structural pressure on Firewalk Studios was already immense. Reports of an 8-year development cycle began to circulate, a cautionary timeline marker suggesting that the game's core concept was drafted back in 2016, long before the multiplayer market consolidated. While active production under Firewalk only began in 2018, this extended gestation meant the game was designed for an era that no longer existed. In 2016, the hero shooter was a gold rush frontier. By 2024, it was a highly saturated territory, defined by genre fatigue. To justify its existence within Sony's ambitious portfolio, Concord needed to offer something distinct. Instead, early previews revealed a project struggling with weak differentiation. The character designs and core gameplay felt familiar, matching rather than challenging the aesthetic standards of established games. When Firewalk opened the gates for its beta tests, the market's response was quiet. The Steam Early Access beta peaked at just 1,124 concurrent players, while the open beta topped out at 2,388. Before a single retail copy had even shipped, Concord was struggling to find traction, proving that in a mature market, simply being polished is no longer enough to close a sale. Concord's standard retail price of $39.99 represented a fundamental strategic decision. Sony publicly defended this upfront cost, arguing that a premium purchase provided the complete experience, 16 playable characters, 12 maps, and 6 game modes, without forcing players to pay for subsequent gameplay updates. Deluxe editions offering early access and cosmetic extras pushed the financial commitment even higher. But this model ran directly into a market long conditioned to pay nothing at checkout. The dominant giants of the genre had spent years training millions of users to expect a $0 entry barrier. By demanding $40 up front, Sony introduced severe customer acquisition friction at the exact moment they needed rapid explosive growth to kickstart matchmaking systems. This pricing choice amplified a growing wave of consumer skepticism. Players had grown wary of new multiplayer pitches, particularly those that looked late to the genre. In a market saturated with options, requiring an upfront payment made the burden of that initial impression incredibly heavy. Concord could no longer rely on casual, low-risk downloads or organic friend group adoption. The $40 fee forced potential players to make a conscious financial investment in an unproven world, choking off the user pipeline before any network effects could ever take hold. On August 23, 2024, Concord officially launched on PlayStation 5 and PC. The market response was immediate, measurable, and devastating. Data from SteamDB revealed that Concord's concurrent player peak on Steam reached just 697 players. For a major first-party release backed by Sony, This was statistically non-viable. Even more telling, the open beta in July had peaked at 2,388 concurrent users, meaning the full, paid release underperformed its free trial by 70%. This immediate lack of volume triggered a reverse network effect spiral. With an incredibly low active user base, matchmaking queues stretched to 10 minutes. These long wait times drove away the few players who did purchase the game, further starving the matchmaking pool and creating a terminal loop of rapid player attrition. Across Steam and community forums, consumer objections settled into distinct, repeatable business pain points. Resistance to the $40 price barrier, structural fatigue with the hero shooter genre, and a clear lack of differentiation from established free-to-play giants where players' social circles already lived. Recognizing this operational reality, Sony acted with swift, clinical efficiency to limit brand damage. On September 3, 2024, just 11 days after launch, the company announced it would delist the game from all storefronts and issue full, automatic refunds to every purchaser. On September 6th, the servers were taken offline. The entire operational run of Sony's major live service bet had lasted exactly 14 days. Today, the era of buying your way into a saturated ecosystem is over. As entertainment giants chase recurring revenue, this collapse proves that even unlimited capital cannot manufacture community or break established network effects. The digital attention economy has rewritten the rules of business, and it's a lesson industry giants are still struggling to learn. What do you think is next for PlayStation? Share your thoughts below.